Recording secretary, please start the meeting.
Chair, the meeting is now being recorded.
I would like to call the regular meeting of February 10, 2025 to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice.
Will the secretary please call roll?
Commissioner Benninger,
Present.
Commissioner Escamilla,
Here.
Commissioner Leo,
Here.
Commissioner Pham, Commissioner Wu,
Here.
Vice Chair Ramos,
Present.
Chair Oliva.
Here.
Chair quorum has been reached at 5:51.
Before we begin, I would like to remind my fellow commissioners to turn your microphones on when speaking and off when not speaking. And when speaking, please place the microphone about 4 inches away from you. Thank you. Members of the public may attend Planning Commission meetings in person or virtually via Zoom. I now invite the Commission Secretary to describe the way the public can access and participate in this meeting.
This meeting is being live streamed via our portal at www.sana-ana.primegov.com/public/portal and to YouTube at www.youtube.com/City of Santa Ana videos. If you would like to provide public comment, you may do so in the following ways. Join the meeting via Zoom, enter meeting ID number 837-9453-8995. When the item that you would like to comment on is being discussed, select the hand icon to let us know you would like to speak. You will be called upon by the name you entered. You can also join the meeting by calling 669-900-6833. Enter meeting ID number 837-9453-8995. When the item that you would like to comment on is being discussed, press 9 to let us know you would like to speak. You will be called upon by the last 3 digits of your phone number. After you're called upon, you may press 6 to unmute yourself. For those who are attending this meeting in person and would like to provide public comment, please fill out a request to speak form located in the lobby and turn it into the secretary. All speakers will have 3 minutes to speak. I will alert you when your time is up.
Thank you. Moving on to public comments on non-public hearing items. In addition, for those of you in attendance today and those joining virtually or by phone that wish to provide comment on the transit zoning code update study session item, this is your opportunity to speak, as there will not be another opportunity later in the meeting. Secretary, does anyone wish to speak?
If you're attending this meeting in person and would like to comment on non-agenda or non-public hearing items, please fill out a request to speak form and turn it into the secretary. If you are participating via Zoom and would like to comment on non-agenda or non-public hearing items, please select the hand icon, and I will ask you to unmute yourself when your time is up. If you're calling and you would like to comment on non-agenda or non-public hearing items, please dial 9, and then 6 to unmute yourself. Chair, we do have speakers.
Since we have a lot of speakers, I'll be calling out names and I'll have you stand in the aisle and then you'll approach the mic as your turn comes. If I can have Tim Rush, Graydon Grewe, I apologize if I mispronounce your name, Cindy Grewe, and Garrett Grewe to get ready for public comment. Thank you.
Good evening, commissioners and staff. My name is Tim Rush. I'm a nearly 40-year resident of Santa Ana. I'm a former redevelopment agency commissioner from many years ago, and actually 30-some years ago. And I have memories of when the city decided to make the entire city a redevelopment project area, the entire city. Some of you in this room might remember that. And when the letters went out to the residents, it filled this entire chamber, the waiting area out to the parking lot and the quad area, and people were still coming. We had a joint meeting of the Redevelopment Commission and the City Council, and people spoke out in objection to that proposal. And finally, in the middle of the meeting, Dan Young said, put a stop to it and said, we're not going to do this. So we're going to stop this proposal. You can all go home. We're not doing it. Anyway, I know you folks are a deliberative body and you will give a lot of thought to what you're doing, but many people in town are scratching their heads saying, what is going on? You want to displace a tremendous number of businesses which have hundreds and hundreds of employees. And those people, many of them live in the area. And I can tell you, they're not going to be able to afford to live in the apartments that are going to be built. So the high density housing that's proposed to be built, they won't be living there. So these businesses will be forced to relocate out to Rialto and San Bernardino and so forth, and they won't be here in this town. And I just wonder what is causing this. I know that it's my understanding there was some crazy directive by the community housing, housing community development from the state of California, and some threat by the attorney general. They were going to sue the city or not let us not approve our housing element if we didn't adopt this. Well, you know, we could adopt a strategy like the city of Huntington Beach and say, well, sorry, we're not going to abide by your rules because it's too much disruption in this town. And what you're proposing and this kangaroo court that's being proposed to have the businesses who supposedly people are objecting to come before, and then they can be put out of business in 6 months, why, that's outrageous. So, I mean, you guys need to really think hard about this project, this proposal that is before you. I think it is a taking under the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution.
Thank you
And
so
you need to
much,
think
Tim.
hard
Your
about
time is
that.
up. Thank you so much. Next, we have Graydon.
Good evening. Am I close enough? Um, good evening, commissioners. I'm here not as just as a concerned business owner, but as an advocate for the economic and social well-being of our city. The proposed transit zoning code amendments, while well-intended, pose a significant and immediate threat to businesses, employees, and residents who depend on the existing economic infrastructure of our community. The elimination of non-conforming businesses through the amortization is not just a policy change, it is an economic upheaval. Many long-standing businesses, which have served as anchors in our community, will be forced to relocate or shut down entirely. These are businesses that employ our neighbors, provide essential services, and contribute tax revenue that fund critical city operations. The forced transition will create an economic displacement, leaving lost jobs in its wake. Furthermore, the restrictive operational standards place an unfair burden on businesses, limiting their hours of operation, imposing costly environmental upgrades, and introducing bureaucratic hurdles that stifle growth. Small and medium-sized businesses, the backbone of our economy, will find it increasingly difficult to survive in an environment that prioritizes transit-oriented development over economic stability. Equally concerning is the impact on property values. The uncertainty surrounding non-conforming use phase-outs and zoning changes will lead to devaluation, making it harder for property owners to sell or reinvest in their assets, reinvesting that brings tax dollars to this city. A thriving business district should not be treated as collateral damage in the pursuit of redevelopment. We urge the Planning Commission to reconsider these amendments and work collaboratively together as a community, not single-sided, with local businesses to create a zoning strategy that fosters growth rather than displacement. Economic vitality and transit-oriented development should not be mutually exclusive goals. They can be done together. What's being proposed is not. There must be a path forward that supports existing businesses while embracing future urban planning needs. I think everyone in this room can get behind the fact that we need to move forward as a city, but doing so single-sidedly will not be successful. The intended outcome is not what's going to happen. We've seen it happen repeatedly and repeatedly, repeatedly. If we work together, we can do this together. If not, we're all going to lose. Thank you for your time and consideration. We respectfully ask that you vote against these amendments, that they not be taken up in their current form, and seek a more balanced approach that protects both the economic and social fabric of our city. Thank you.
Thank you. Cindy?
Good evening. I'm Cindy Garivey, and I am a building owner and business owner on Fuller Street. And not to take more time, I echo all the sentiments that Graydon put forward and the first gentleman. I have a very difficult time understanding how I can displace 25% of the people who work for me who do not live or live in Santa Ana and count on this job daily. So I would urge you also to reconsider the proposed displacement. Our business will leave the city of Santa Ana if we will be forced to. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Garrett?
Good evening. Hi, my name is Garrett. I'm the president of Supreme Abrasives, a business that proudly operates here in Santa Ana on Fuller Street. For years, we have contributed to the city, not just as a company, but as a vital part of the local economy. Today, I stand before you to address a matter of critical importance, the city's plans to rezone the area where our business is located, and the profound consequences that will have on our company, our employees, and the greater Santa Ana community. As a manufacturer of essential goods with a distribution location in Santa Ana, we rely on our current location to serve our customers efficiently. The proposed rezoning threatens to push us out of Santa Ana entirely. This is not just a logistical inconvenience, it is a fundamental disruption to our business operations. We employ 20 hardworking individuals in California, 3 of whom reside in Santa Ana. These are not just numbers. These are families who depend on their jobs to make ends meet, to pay rent, to put food on the table. If the city moves forward with this rezoning, these employees will face the very real risk of losing their jobs, as we are left with no choice but to relocate the remainder of our company out of state. Our current location serves as a distribution location for the products we make. Our production has already been forced out of California to more business-friendly states. But it is not just our company and employees who will suffer. Supreme Abrasives does business with other companies in Santa Ana. We purchase goods and services locally. We buy meals, shop in stores, and contribute to the city's tax base. Our departure would mean less economic activity, fewer dollars circulating in the local economy, and a direct negative impact on the businesses that depend on us. Beyond the financial impact, there is a larger issue at stake. The messaging this rezoning sends to businesses like ours. If a company that has been a part of a community for years can be forced out due to policy changes, what does that say to other businesses considering Santa Ana as their home? It creates uncertainty, discourages investment, and ultimately stifles economic growth. I would bet every business owner and building owner represented here behind me is second-guessing their future in this great city. I urge the city to reconsider this rezoning decision. Instead of pushing businesses out, we should be fostering an environment where companies like ours can thrive. Supreme wants to stay in Santa Ana, continue employing local residents, and keep contributing to this community. But if the zoning change proceeds, we will be forced to leave, taking jobs, revenue, and economic stability with us. Let's work together to find a solution that supports businesses, protects jobs, and ensures a prosperous future for all of Santa Ana. Thank you.
Thank you. I call forward Gavin Geary, Mike Tardif, Bob Adams, and Harvey Bagel.
Good evening, Planning Commission, staff. My name is Mike Tardif. I'm a longtime Santa Ana resident and business owner, property owner. Concerning the planned elimination of industrial zoning and businesses and jobs in the SD 84 Transit Zoning Code area. Um, This rezoning will have dramatic effects on residential neighborhoods, 200 businesses, property values, and hundreds of Santa Ana jobs. All told, you will be affecting over $1 billion of value and livelihoods. It's $1 billion, 200 businesses, property values, business values, and jobs and the residents. That's a tremendous amount that money that affects a lot of people. And really we haven't had enough collaboration with the planning department to really justify what they're doing. They haven't come out with a public discussion of this opportunity for the public to discuss the draft regulations since they came out only a month ago. They've had this thing for like 9 months. After 9 months of being subject to the moratorium, which is bad enough, the city has published the draft regulations, which will result in business elimination. That brings up the subject of amortization. That it's very unclear what they intend to do with that. It's very subjective. I don't know if you've had a chance to look at the draft regulations. If you understand what that amortization is, that's when they determine what kind of business you have. If they don't like it, they'll give you a certain amount of time to get out. That's what it is. This is being done in the name of environmental justice. But this is without verifiable evidence. There have been no studies done, none, zero. We haven't seen the updated environmental impact report. That's not available for public comment and staff response. If the city's concerned about justice, why aren't they mandating single-family homes for this area? Which would reflect closely the character of Logan and Lacey neighborhoods, rather than gentrifying high density and high rises. I believe this rezoning is actually a land grab in favor of developers. The regulations will have significant impacts. The city has not reached out to the business community or neighborhoods at large for input and collaboration.
Thank you.
They don't
Mike,
have
your
any plans
time's
to
up.
do so.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We'll have Gavin approach the microphone.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Bob Adams. I own and operate Adams Iron Company in Santa Ana since 1978. I began on the Logan Street, right near Santa Ana Boulevard. Beautiful downtown neighborhood there. Joe Andrade back here, who I'm very sensitive to the neighborhood there. Back in 1978, my dreams were to create a company, grow it, and the opportunity came up for me to buy a building in the Burke development on Poinsettia Street. 9 beautiful buildings built and completed in 2002, 23 years old. Nice buildings. And I'm very concerned, obviously, so I'll get to it. First, I wanted to thank all you commissioners for listening to us, and I want to thank the staff, Min Tai, congratulations on becoming assistant city manager. Margarita, what happened to our chiefs? That's what I want to know. Ricardo, thank you. And Ali, congratulations on your promotion. With regards to the draft, I really do appreciate the interaction that I've had with Min and his staff. I agree that discontinuance of noxious uses will solve the problem. However, a larger problem is brewing. It's uncertainty regarding the transferability of legal nonconforming uses. There is no existing precedent similar to another jurisdiction consistent with the way the city of Santa Ana is going about this. In my last meeting with Min, I submitted to him, which I've given to all of you commissioners, and I've also submitted via email, some recommendations with regards to transferability and some other issues regarding the rules that will be governed under legal nonconforming. I would hope that you would read these and take them to heart, look at them, and look at how the actual law reads, and which I will also say that the items that I've given you that are in blue on the paper that you have, they add clarity and are very important to our business community. I also believe that the added comments will go a long way to quell most of the business owners' concerns and mitigate legal action for the city. And I'll leave you with what I believe here is the law. Transfer of title does not affect the right to continue a lawful, non-conforming use that runs with the land. Rather, the use of the land, not its ownership, at the time the use becomes non-conforming determines the right to continue that use. The principle applies to the rights of property owners as well as lessees. And in summary, transfer of title or leasing the property does not affect the right
Thank
to
you so
continue
much,
a
all of your
lawful,
time's up.
non-conforming use,
Thank
but
you
the
so
new
much for
owner.
your comment. I'll now call to the microphone Harvey Feigl. If we can also have Jason Rush and David Zeck stand in line so we can get to the microphone faster.
Good evening, commissioners and staff. My name is Harvey Biggle, and I own and operate a company called Reed Thomas. It was started in Santa Ana in 1981, down off of Tustin. After that, we moved to 902 East Walnut, 1 block south of First Street. And then as we grew, we moved to 1025 North Santiago in 1989, 36 years ago. Over that 36 years, we have not fielded one complaint for anything, noise, dust, anything, because we're aware, we're cognizant of where we are, that we have some residents behind us. But on Santiago, it's a thoroughfare street. The buses and the trucks and the commuter cars go right to the freeway. There's 2 points that I want to speak on in particular. We're M2 right now, even with a moratorium, and we're allowed 24/7 to do whatever we want to do, within reason of our operation. The proposed hours of operation in this draft put me at 7 a.m. to 6 p.m., and it cannot happen. As a general engineering contractor, we have projects all over 4 and 5 counties, and the Santa Ana location doesn't manufacture or process anything. It's simply mechanics trucks, service trucks, heavy equipment haul trucks, material transport trucks that leave between 5 and 6 a.m. every morning and get back 7 to 8 at night. So the hours of operation, unless there's some reason not to, need to be looked at hardly. The second one, I'm getting in the weeds here. The second one I want to address specifically is the noise levels proposed in that draft document. The noise levels proposed in that draft document are 55. Do you know what the decibels reading right in this meeting are right here? 65. Okay, just normal conversation is 65. When I put a decibel meter in my yard, 150 foot back from Santiago, and a car drives by, a car, not a truck, 71 decibels. When we were silent at 5:15 in the morning, I took these readings, the freeway or whatever noise, ambient noise is 65. I submitted a couple of documents for you to review on decibels, and OSHA doesn't even regulate noise until it gets to 90 decibels. And our operation, we're running, from what I've recorded so far, mainly in the 70s. So please look at the one document I gave you was from Ocean, and the other one is a general document about noise levels and tolerance. Thank you.
Call Jason Rush, David Zeck, and Richard Chiarini.
Good afternoon, Planning Commission. My name is Jason Rush and I represent JBW Enterprises. we have property both in Logan and on Lacey. Uh, Without going through some of the previous comments, let me just give you this as an example. If you have an integrated business where one part complements the other part, and you want to go through a sale of the business, both parts have to go together. But under this proposal, one part can't go with the other because the zoning can't transfer over. So that means that the entire value of one aspect of an integrated business will be lost. And in this specific case, that has a cost of 8 figures. This is not chump change. Now, obviously, this, you know, if you go through like antitrust, that's one thing. You go through the Federal Department of Justice. But, this is quite a power for a local municipality to take to make this level of business decision for us. If we're going to decide to sell an integrated business, we have to be able to sell it in its entirety, unless you have something with, say, the Department of Justice, which just wouldn't. So you have to be able to be cognizant of what this is. The last point I will make is I certainly hope that this doesn't go, well, 2 points. One, it doesn't go from study session to planning commission to council almost within a 30 or 40-day period. This issue is too large to go through that. The other issue is that at the very least, there should be a significant CEQA document produced going through all of this. Like the other gentlemen and other people have said so far, there will be people who will remain living here in Santa Ana. The jobs will go. So where are they going to go work? Because we're losing industrial property left and right in Orange County. They're not going to, most likely they're not going to work here. So that means they're going to have to go out to the IE. You have to factor what that is and what traffic and all of it. Because it's an integral part of all of what this is. So I hope you think about it from that point of view. Thanks.
Thank you. David Zeck and Richard Chiarini.
Good evening. My name is David Zeck. I'm with Pacific Plumbing. We've been in Santa Ana for 95 years, and we have seen a lot of change. I've had the business owner, Henry Schluter, was a council member at one time. We've trained a lot of people. I've had grandfathers and grandsons and have worked for this business over the years. But my concern tonight, and everybody said before me, I agree with, but it's the hours of operation. We're essential business. We operate 24/7. We're a good neighbor. We're quiet in the evening time when people have to come and go. But I've got gentlemen that are doing emergency work at the middle of the night and they need material. They've got to come in and get it. So the hours of operation will restrict us, and I can't follow it. It's impossible. We service way too much, even for you guys, we do work after hours. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Richard Chiarini and Michael Feely.
Good evening. My name is Richard Chiarini. I'm a resident of Santa Ana for 46 years. I also own a business called Chiarini Marble and Stone on Washington Street. It's a family business. And we have been carving stone since we started here. As a matter of fact, the fountain that sits in the Artist Village, we carved by hand. Material was from Peru, and we carved that material on my site and donated it to the city. This is a city that I love. I have been supporting the city and artists over the years, and we have a tremendous amount of work that we've done for major homes in the United States. What I do, I encourage everyone to come and see what we do. We're a very unique business. And we've invested heavily in computerized machines recently because of the changes in the air and quality. We carve with diamonds and water so that we keep dust down. We have waterfalls and invested heavily in this. I'm with the draft proposal that's proposed. I feel that my business will end and I won't be able to pass this on to my children and my grandchildren who are also brought up here in the city. We're not I live here. My grandchildren go to school. They go to El Sol here I have 6 grandchildren that live with me. We're extended family. I'm so proud of the city, but I have a chance of not having a livelihood because of the way the draft reads. I want to be able to stay and continue my work. And I do encourage you just to come and see. It's unbelievable. The artists and the amount of work that these creative people do is vital. It's just a wonderful feeling to be able to create like this. So please look over I want to be able to pass my business down. I would love to sell it, or that's not even in the cards to sell. I just would like to continue it. Well, thank you for your time and appreciate it.
Michael Feely and Ismay.
Thank you, City Council. In 2018, me and my wife, I married my wife. She's a local, and I'm from Riverside. I grew up in the Inland Empire, third generation auto body repair. There's a little shop on Second Street that we saw, and it was for sale. And though I was consulting for the auto body industry, I decided, heck, let's check into it. So heard a lot of people tell me around, hey, city of Santa Ana is not so easy. You better be careful. And I said, well, I'm going to give it a try. In the whole time from occupancy and approvals and everything else, the city of Santa Ana has been awesome. It's just been a pleasure doing business in the city of Santa Ana. I met so many good friends and other business owners and such, and industry, doing trading in trade and what have you. And now it feels like it's in jeopardy. It feels like, especially my industry, it feels like we're targeted because we are an auto body repair center in a residential area, which, by the way, I thought it was really very strange. I told my wife, they're never going to give us certificate occupancy here because we got houses around, but we were grandfathered in on the name that we purchased. But just to say that $1.3 million later invested into the property between upgrades and things that were approved by the city and what have you, we've got a lot invested in the property. And I got a lot of folks telling me that, that you're going to be cut probably 50% in half, with this proposal. I hope that's not the case. And maybe some of y'all can speak to that, because we really can't take the 50% hit just from being stamped as an SD 84 TZC zoning. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Ismael Menchaca and Mark McCandless.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
I think everybody's mimicked most of the thoughts around here, so I'm just gonna go into how a little different direction. So I'm a 4th generation tile setter. So it was my great grandfather, uncle, and my dad. We started in the city of Orange in 1920. My grandmother burned the shop down. City of Santa Ana wanted local businesses, wanted industry. So we moved into Santa Ana right off of Poinsettia Street and Santa Ana Boulevard. We owned the whole block. That was done in probably the late 40s. In 85, we had a metal Quonset hut and a dirt lot. The city of Santa Ana kind of reached out to my dad to upgrade the area, and he built two 15,000-foot warehouses. We've kept them very nice. We've been there. This is since the 80s. And I think I wasn't part of the Renaissance plan, but I was working in the business. I started working there mowing the lawns at 12 years old and have been a tile setter my whole life. And there's a lot of guys like me who chose industry, construction, and this is how we make our living. In 2010, my dad was kind of letting me know that the Renaissance plan, they wanted to bring in the live work lofts. We were going to be the third phase. They were going to take our property through eminent domain. It didn't happen. They built the first three phases. The first phase is directly across the street from me on Poinsettia. But when you guys reached out at that point, it was a much fairer deal. They didn't devalue the buildings. And I think what everybody's mimicking here is to the business owners, there is no approach out. We can't leave this area. We can't move to Placentia. We can't move to Fullerton. If we can't sell them, nobody's going to come in and buy a 15,000 square foot building and put a museum in there, put a dog groomer in there. You do need to have a plan to where the residences, the loft live units, because they're all working there too, and this plan affects them. We could all work together. But I think the city's got a decision to make. You can either work with the business owners, because most of us are willing to work, and we're pro-city. Work with the existing residents, the Logan Street residences. They want to keep their homes. They want to keep them successful. And the new kind of high density, there's going to be those people in our area. We can either work together, or you're literally going to have 150 individual lawsuits on your hand. Because you have to be fair to all parties, and the business owners, the industrial property owners. A lot of us have been there for a lot of years, and we would like to stay. And most of our businesses are very well kept, so
Thank
3
you.
minutes.
Dan Demonsi, Stephanie Wells, and Michael Friedman.
Good evening, Planning Commission and staff. My name is Dan Dominowski. I represent a business owner and property owner here in town. We're in the recycling business. Recycling businesses are typically located in industrial zoning, which is becoming increasingly scarce in Southern California. The one thing that's not changing is the requirements on municipalities, including Santa Ana, to comply with diversion and other types of recycling requirements. And I think it's important to recognize that recycling businesses are essential, and it's not only good for the environment, helps conserve energy and natural resources, but also helps the city of Santa Ana to achieve their goals and objectives, and also the public, which is served through the CRV, California Refund Value, through CalRecycle. The residents in the city of Santa Ana, they need to be served by recycling centers and certified processors, and they'll be impacted by these proposed regulations. So I'd just like to thank you for taking those into consideration.
Thank you. Stephanie Wells?
Sorry, that's okay. Did you go? That she's going first.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry, I didn't stand. That was right. Didn't count right. All right, good evening, everyone. My name is Stephanie Wells. I'm a resident and property owner in the area. I know that we've heard a lot of business reasons, monetary reasons to not move forward, and I come from a business background, so I do understand the challenges, right, of the changes that we are going through as a city. But I just want to make sure that we don't forget, especially coming from business land and in city planning, that the health and safety of the community should come first. It's a challenge I've had to spearhead in the business world when we forget about the everyday people and the people actually living here and walking their dogs, walking their kids to school, coming from church, buying their bread at a bakery. These are the people and neighbors that I see every day. So I can directly speak to the impact, and I just want to make sure that residents are heard as well and not just the businesses. So that's all I really wanted to say. I've submitted also a written comment. I just wanted to make sure residents were heard. Thank you so much for your time.
Michael Friedman.
Hi, I'm Rachel Freeman, and this is my father, Michael Freeman. We're
Hello.
property owners in the area. I'll speak first, then I'll let my father speak. I understand that this moratorium was put in place as a temporary measure, but as discussions continue about making it permanent, I must raise a serious concern. At what point does this stop being regulation and start being a government taking of private property? When a regulation permanently prevents property owners from earning a fair return, it could become a regulatory taking under the Fifth Amendment, as established in Supreme Court cases like Penn Central and Lucas versus South Carolina Coastal Council. A permanent moratorium could expose the city to legal challenges and financial liabilities. Instead of stripping property rights, we should seek fair solutions that protect both the residents and property owners. I urge you to reconsider the long-term consequences of this decision.
Rachel, that was beautiful and well said. I couldn't have done a better job myself. And someday I'd like to leave my properties. My name is Michael Friedman, and I own 2 properties, approximately 17,000 square feet. And between both of the properties, almost an acre. 1008 Fuller Street and 1012 Fuller Street. As of recently, the building right across the street has become vacant, and it's like a war zone, okay? I invite any of you to come down and see what it's like. And the police come every other day, and they chase them out. And then the next day, they come back selling drugs, selling fentanyl, causing damage, breaking in. And we were a victim of that. They broke into my building when it was vacant for a month, and they ripped out all the wire, all the copper plumbing. And to fix it all, there was a flood, and they had to take out the asbestos. It was $650,000. And insurance covered maybe a fraction of that. I feel like a Native American Indian, like when they had their land and it was stripped from them. I can't well tell you how hard I worked to buy these buildings, okay? 15 hours a day, and it didn't come cheap without a lot of sacrifice, and I know a lot of people in the room had a lot of sacrifice that they said tonight, and I can feel it in my heart, and I hope you can feel it in your heart to really think twice about taking away these businesses that were so rooted into the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Jack Hagan, Andy Schmidt, and David Ricciardi.
Yeah, hi. My name is Jack Hogan. I'm a commercial real estate broker. And so I am an expert in property values in the city of Santa Ana. And you know what I think is challenging for the property owners and business owners alike that own property here is the amount of loss in property value that they are experiencing because of this ordinance and moratorium on industrial uses. So just to give you some color, if you owned, there's a lot of different sized buildings in the regions that are being under redevelopment. The small ones, I don't even know what to tell these people because you can't sell your property that's less than 10,000 square feet of land to a residential developer. There's no, it doesn't make business sense if you do the numbers. And if you own a bigger one, you can sell it to a residential developer. But if you own, say, a 30,000 foot building that's on a 65,000 square foot lot, you have to sell your building, and then the building would be worth if it was in a different city, or if it was a different part of Santa Ana, would be worth, say, $11 million. But if a developer's looking at it as 65,000 square feet of piece of land, then it's worth $6 million or maybe less. Just to get to the 6 million after losing 5 million, you have to wait for 12 months for the property to be entitled, maybe more. And at that point, when you go buy a property elsewhere, you don't even know if you can buy an equivalent property for $11 million anymore if the market goes up. So it creates a huge challenge for these people, not to mention the fact that they have to 1031 exchange, which they only have 45 days to locate something after the property sells. So I feel incredibly compassionate for those people that are losing this amount of money. I'm not aware of any subsidies that are going to be given to people for losing 5 million, 2 million, $10 million. The bigger the property, the more the property loss. And the smaller property, you pretty much lose it all. So it's just, it's extremely challenging for those property owners in these areas. And just being an expert on property values, I wanted to point that out. Thank you.
Good evening, commissioners and staff. My name is Andy Schmidt. I have a very small property on Lincoln Avenue. I'm an environmental consultant, so my ears pick up every time I hear talk about environmental studies, environmental sampling, regional impacts. I'd like to think that I have contributed to this community. I've been here since 1999. 3.5 years ago, I made a big decision in my business model to purchase a piece of property. I approached the city, described my usage, was told some do's and don'ts about how to occupy the piece of property I was interested in. But while in Santa Ana, I've worked with property owners, mainly industrial property owners, to treat soil, groundwater, and air. Recently, last week, I started a project at Kindred Hospital to remove their underground storage tank. I'd like to feel that I've given something back to this community. I don't employ people. I'm mainly an owner-operator. My problems with purchasing my property began on day one. After interacting with the city and the transaction completed, I was told I was not allowed to occupy the property. So for the first 6 months of my ownership, I paid mortgage, and then I also paid rent on where I was. 6 months into that process, I was told that I could complete my business license application. Shortly thereafter, I started attending meetings in the Logan neighborhood and hearing from the community. And I was taken aside at those meetings and told personally that I would be kicked off my land, that I should have been informed about the processes that were underway. I was never told anything about what was coming. And I'd just like to say that after going through the TZC amendments, I don't have a way out for myself. And I had emailed, I don't think there's a lot of transparency in this process, and it kind of speaks to my ownership record of buying the property. Like recently I emailed Margarita, never heard back. And so I'd just like to say that the adoption of the TZC will put me in direct conflict with the city. I cannot, economically, I cannot sell the property for what I owe on it. I can't pay mortgage on something and pick up all my equipment and leave my location. So I would just like you to please reconsider maybe a balanced approach to this. I think more time is necessary, though. Thank you very much.
David Rio. I can't make out your last name. I'm so sorry. Robert Escalando and Kelly Crossley.
Robert Escalante. I've just in reviewing some of these cases that come up like this, 30 years ago, I was involved with a project in downtown Santa Ana. It became known as the Fiesta Marketplace. And I remember the city basically had all of their ducks in order, but at the time, Dan Grisette was the mayor. He basically suggested that, you know, the business, they needed more of a right to be involved. And if he would deliver the city, they would deliver that, we would deliver a project. And we created the Fiesta Marketplace, and we created it for the residents. We created it so there can be a public-private partnership that has been maybe thought of not working. You know, today we have a present administration that they're pulling back from all these outer countries because manufacturing and industry is what he's bringing back to this country. So we lost that for a lot of times, and as most of you know, our kids don't know how to work with their hands. Our kids don't know how to start a business. And I think if you reach out, your kids will eventually have that issue or that problem, because we used to welcome big Targets and Costco's to the county, to the country, but now they're kind of like not, the young people do not know what to do. And I think from my standpoint, as we plan for our future, but plan for your kids' future, because those are our answers. You've been to my place a number of times, and you see our showroom. It basically is all about what the city destroyed, you know? So everything in our showroom is, you know, the Saddleback Hotel, the Corday Hotel. They're bringing tour groups to our place so they can show what the city of Santa Ana once created. So for all of us, let's, I guess, the answer is, let's try to walk together in this. I mean, you've delivered your time and energy, and I have too. And now, look at me, I'm no longer 17. But thanks for your time, your effort, your energy. But when you create this stuff on paper, just know that you can get your, for instance, you can get your car washed, but you can wash it yourself. But when you wash it yourself, you'll have much more pride on what you just did. So in parting, you have a lot of work to do, but we can create this public-private partnership to create 27 square miles, because right now it's just an area. We're really going to be having to look at 27 square miles. And thank you very much for your time. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Kelly Krause-Lee, and I'm here speaking as a resident and homeowner in the Transit Zoning Code. And I'm also speaking on behalf of the Santiago Street Lofts HOA. I am on the board there, and we represent over 100 homeowners in the area. We strongly support the amendments to the zoning code with one change. Storage units also do not belong in a transit-oriented development area. We ask that you do not allow outside business interests to override the concerns of the approximately 10,000 residents who live here and deal with the health and safety concerns every day. I can't walk down many of the streets because there are giant trucks speeding down, nearly running me over, ignoring stop signs, plus debris from the metal recycler and other businesses that are not invested in maintaining their property the way that us residents are. I'm frequently woken up in the wee hours because there's idling trucks at the warehouse next door. Think of the air pollution of that multiplied by hundreds of businesses. Our HOA is spending thousands of dollars every year to replace backflows that are being stolen and recycled down the street at Bruce Metals. And that owner has been completely unsupportive to the city and to us in cleaning up his business and their practices. And that's to say nothing of the air pollution from the trucks that idle in front of the dump right by the school. So how would you feel having a metal recycler and a dump 200 feet away from where your kids are trying to learn, or a crematorium backing up to your home and neighborhood park? And now I hear another metal recycler is interested in the vacant Blinking Owl property. Can you imagine another Bruce Metals? I invite any of you to come down and see what we're dealing with every day at that property. The city council agreed twice unanimously, which never happens here, we all know that, that industrial uses in this zone have placed an inequitable environmental and health burden on those of us in the Logan and Lacey neighborhoods. The general plan adopted in 2022 compels us to address those inequities by approving the proposed amendments. So I ask you, are you going to vote for property values of outside business owners or for the health and safety of 10,000 residents, many of whom are children? Thank you.
Last call for Ismael Menchaca and David R. If not, we'll move forward to anyone who wants to speak on Zoom.
Erica Gonzalez, can you please unmute yourself? You have 3 minutes.
Yes, hello. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, awesome. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Planning Commission and members of the public. My name is Erica Gonzalez. I am a lifelong resident of the Delhi neighborhood, as well as a small business owner from the Main Street Corridor, a leader of the Delhi Neighborhood Association, and the Finance and Logistics Director of Orange County Environmental Justice. I have been a community organizer in Santa Ana for more than a decade, and I am 100% in support of the SB 84 Transit Zoning Code update and appreciate the city's continued collaboration with residents and community-based organizations such as Green MPNA and OCEJ that have years of experience and research to support the elimination of M1 and M2 zoning in the Logan and Lacey neighborhoods. As an advocate for our most marginalized communities and a resident myself in what the EPA has designated as one of the 5 environmental justice clusters because of the prolonged systemic discrimination that these neighborhoods have faced due to polluting industries. From the city's website, for folks who don't know, an EJ community or environmental justice community is an area of the city where residents have the highest risk of exposure to pollution in the air, water, and soil. This pollution may be caused by passing vehicles, such as cars and trucks that a lot of folks here have stated are used by their businesses. Or by the daily activities of businesses and institutions. Residents in these areas also tend to be burdened by socioeconomic and health issues, such as higher rates of language barriers, poverty, and asthma. So these areas also tend to experience lower rates of investment and improvements from individuals, private companies, and public agencies. All of these factors can lead to unequal opportunities to lead a healthy and prosperous life. As a leader of the Delhi Neighborhood Association and a member of QUAL, a resident-led committee in the Madison neighborhood, I, as well as my neighbors and fellow organizers, would love to see a similar moratorium proposed along the standard industrial corridor. For folks who are asking where the evidence of the years of pollution endured by these residents is located, I encourage you to research the California Department of Toxic Substance Control, who oversees the cleanup of many of the sites in California, including in Santa Ana. The DTSC's goal is to protect people and the environment from toxic substances. DTSC resources include the EnviroStar, which is a database that contains information on these cleanup sites overseen by the DTSC, and the Site Cleanup Program database, which contains information on cleanup sites overseen by the State Water Resources Control Board. Green MPNA has been monitoring the air quality of Santa Ana neighborhoods for years, and Orange County Environmental Justice has also been monitoring the soil lead contamination issue that the city has had for decades. While I can understand that not all of the businesses in these areas are guilty of being polluters, the truth of the matter is that an alarming number of them are, and they've gone decades and generations without any checks and balances. All we are asking is that our health be put at the forefront of.
Thank you, Erica. Your time is up. Do we have another speaker?
Christy Taylor, can you unmute yourself?
Yes. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you.
I just wanted to talk as both a
Christy,
business
if
owner
I can
and
stop you real quick, you have an echo. You might have another device on.
yeah. Hang on.
And that'll probably solve the background noise we're hearing.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. So good evening, everybody, and thank you for the time that we were afforded to speak. I'm both a building and a business owner, and while I echo many of the concerns that have been raised by the other building and business owners, I just want to remind everybody that as a family business, we operated in Irvine for many years. Our business grew, and we looked to move to a new area so that we could continue our expansion. In 2016, we looked at a property on Fuller. We went to the city and confirmed that, in fact, this property would continue under the general industrial regulations and zoning. With that, we invested a substantial amount of money in the building, in moving our business, in hiring new people, in making tenant improvements, et cetera, et cetera. So as our business grew, and based on the understanding that this would continue to be general industrial zoning, we also sublet another building to continue to grow our business and hire more people and pay more taxes to the city of Santa Ana. So I have read the documents several times. Very difficult to understand how this will directly impact our business. We have a general sense. We don't know if we'll still be able to operate. We do employ many employees and have several that live in the city of Santa Ana as well. We don't know, should we have to leave the area, which we most likely would if this goes through, what the scope of business can be put into this zoning area. It minimizes the value of our building. It minimizes the scope of what potential tenants could even look like. But these are all questions that we have right now, given the lack of some of the clarity. I think some of the issues that were raised earlier this evening in terms of concepts around amortization, the environment and the environmental studies, we haven't seen any of this. I mean, truly, we don't really understand what the motivation is. We are not polluters. We are good, owners, building owners. We've made tremendous investment. And as I mentioned, we hire many people and employ many people in the city. I've been struck by the lack of cooperation and collaboration and outreach to the business owners. I simply don't understand it. I have proactively called the city many times and left many messages and no response to any of my questions. I don't understand that either when I'm trying to seek to understand. So I would ask that the city really please try and work with
Thank
the
you so
business
much for your
community.
comment, Christy. Your time's up. Thank you so much. Can we have the next speaker?
We don't have any additional speakers on Zoom.
Thank you, everyone who came out to give a comment. Moving on to the consent calendar. Is there a motion to approve item A, minutes from January 27, 2025, and item B, excused absences?
I make a motion to accept.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
I have a motion by Commissioner Benninger and a second by Commissioner Escamilla. Secretary, please call for a roll call vote.
Commissioner Benninger,
Aye.
Commissioner Scamilla,
Aye.
Commissioner Leo,
Aye.
Commissioner Pham, Commissioner Wu,
Aye.
Vice Chair Ramos,
Aye.
Chair Oliva.
Aye.
Motion approved by majority vote with Commissioner Pham absent.
I want to check in with the commission real quick. Do we need to take a break or can we continue? Okay. That concludes the consent calendar items. Moving on to the study session, as there is no public hearing items today. Oh, yes, Vice Chair Ramos.
Yes, so I will be having to recuse myself from this item tonight. There is a potential conflict of interest due to my residency. Staff has to complete an analysis to determine whether or not there is a conflict. So out of an abundance of caution, I'm recusing myself.
Thank you. Principal, yes, Commissioner Escamilla.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if it would be okay to, when staff does the introduction to kind of let the audience know what we typically do in a work study, just to kind of direct what our conversation will be. Yeah.
Ollie will take care of that for us. Thank you. Principal Planner Margarita Macedonio will provide a short presentation.
Thank you, Chair. Before Margarita begins her presentation, just want to provide for everyone in the room an overview of what a work study session is. So it's an opportunity to present a topic of reasonable complexity to the commission for your understanding and your feedback prior to any action being taken. So this evening, no action is being taken. There's no approval or denial or continuance. This is informational and an opportunity for the commissioners to pose objective questions or objective statements of direction to staff in order to help staff prepare something for future action that reflects that feedback when it comes back to the Planning Commission. So with that, I'll turn it over to Margarita to share the presentation. Thank you.
Good evening, members of the Planning Commission. Through tonight's session, we want to accomplish a couple of things to help with the clarity. As part of the overview, we want to provide you some background on the project. We want to cover why we're here, how we got here, how we are listening, how we are sharing information, what we have heard, and then we'll segue into the project discussion that will include an overview of the draft regulation components. We have 4 components: the map change, which is the removal of the industrial overlay zones, the M1 and M2 zones that are currently in place. The second component is the non-conforming provisions and operating standards that are in the draft amendments that have been provided to you. We'll cover updates to permitted uses, and we'll discuss a little bit about the new amortization process tool that is being introduced through these amendments. We also want to cover what comes next and then open it up for discussion. For providing background, we have here the city map, and in the blue, we have the boundaries of the Transit Zoning Code Specific Development 84. So generally, this area covers north of East First Street to Flower, through Civic Center, past Santiago, along the freeway going southbound on Grant. So those are the general boundaries for your reference. We also have the current Transit Zoning Code zoning designation map with the industrial overlay, and you could see we've highlighted the neighborhoods that encompass the overlay: Logan, Lacey, downtown. We also have pointed out the train station and the Civic Center. And this is just to give you a sense of the current zoning designations that are allowed in this area. So why are we here? We are here because there was a moratorium that was adopted and extended by the City Council last year. First, it was in April 16th, when the moratorium ordinance was passed, and it was extended on May 21st of 2024. The moratorium stems from growing community complaints and calls for service regarding polluting facilities operating in the adjacent neighborhoods. You've heard some of that feedback earlier today, but one thing that we've noticed is there have been concerns about metal recycling facilities, a crematory, a trash sorting facility adjacent to residential and nearby schools in the neighborhoods. Regulatory compliance is also an issue affecting industrial businesses and the effect on neighborhoods. And we also are here because we want to prioritize and address issues that are caused by incompatible land uses. Part of the direction that the City Council gave to staff during the moratorium was to evaluate the land use regulations closely in the current transit zoning code. And before the moratorium expires on April 15th, 2025, to come back and propose permanent regulations that would phase out the industrial uses. So how we got here? Following the adoption of the moratorium, we know that it's in effect until April 15th. We did want to remind this body that the decision and direction is rooted in 3 areas: the community complaints and calls for service that have been provided to the city, the police department, fire, etc. More on the regulatory compliance issues with industrial businesses, and the irreconcilable land uses, having the overlay remain here in the current transit zoning code area. What we're showing here to the right is an image that one of our residents, the Logan neighborhood president, shared with many people. And this is in regards to what's escalated the concerns and the priorities. On August 29th, there was a fire that came from the crematory, and this is a photo, and there's sound about the concerned residents that were wondering the fear, the concern, just there was a lot happening on that night, but that was the icing on the cake that really brought a lot of concern to what was happening and what kind of controls are in place to help address these types of situations here in the Logan Lacey downtown area. A little bit more on the concerns and the complaints. We have more housing in the area that's been developed. We have elementary school children. We have families trying to get to and from their places safely. And so what's happened is we do have some bad operators that are nearby. We have a metal recycling place. We have a trash sorting facility. There's a crematory. And so the experience that's been shared with council, with staff, is that children are being exposed to a lot of the idling trucks that are trying to get through to these facilities. And it's becoming a situation where it's drawing other concerns. You have people congregating, taking over the protected bike lane where they can't. They're not able to ride through. And so that's another concern that has been factored into the evaluation of what are we going to do about it? What is going to be proposed? And that was part of the follow-up where we're looking at that. What we have presented to you are a draft of those code amendments that are recommended to address these ongoing concerns. The incompatibility and the conflicting land uses is not anything new. Since the adoption of the Transit Zoning Code in 2010, new land uses were designated and zoned for all of the properties within the district, and it promoted more new mixed-use communities, more of the transit infrastructure to preserve the existing character and the pedestrian scale of this area. The general plan land use designations that were adopted did not include the industrial uses. They included mixed use, residential, and commercial uses. We had 2 overlay zones, the light industrial, the heavy industrial, M1, M2, that applied to certain properties that allowed them to continue operating as an industrial zone. However, with the option of having future mixed-use development to be exercised at the discretion of that property owner. Since that time, 14 years ago now, the industrial uses have remained. There's been some ownership changes. They've undergone expansions or intensifications, and currently We have 130 of the industrial businesses that are within the overlay zone in this area. The activities that the industrial businesses have created are land use conflicts, numerous land use conflicts and disturbances with the existing and new infill development and residential communities that have affected the surrounding residents. Some of the impacts include the odor, dust, traffic, noise at night, the vibrations happening from the trucks, and other documented impacts. This provides us an opportunity as we've developed the draft amendments to do some listening, because that's important. It's an important part of our role for changes like this that we are considering. So how we are listening. Through the adoption and extension of the moratorium, it opened up avenues for community input from property owners, business owners, real estate commercial brokers, residents, advocacy organizations, and others, many others. So we've been able to listen and to, more importantly, factor in objectively what we're hearing from the concerned constituents in different ways. We've had meetings, there's been emails, phone calls. We created a dedicated project webpage to keep the community informed. And we've had field visits with the affected businesses, residents, real estate brokers, and more. And we are grateful for the opportunities with the industrial business owners. Many of them have spoken tonight to be able to have site visits, to get to know the history and to value that as we're thinking about the draft recommendations. It's something that relationship has helped inform, our experience as well. More about how we are listening. We held a city informational meeting in October at the train station. We had over 150 people in attendance. And so we also noticed this meeting, we mailed it out to all of the addresses in SD 84. And we also developed a frequently asked questions sheet to help address a lot of concerns, misinformation that was floating out there. We thought it was so important to have this informational meeting. Subsequent to that, we had zoning code update business stakeholder meetings. This is part of the process to update our comprehensive zoning code update. And so we did have business owners from SD 84 attend these meetings, and we had a dedicated breakout session to do some more listening about their specific owner concerns. Even though the focus of the meeting was different, we thought it was so important to provide that space to listen and to address concerns. Tonight's study session continues that process of listening, of gathering input, as we continue to review and refine the draft regulations. The PowerPoint that has been shared with you is available to the public on the moratorium webpage. And the input that we're receiving from this study session and the correspondence that is going to be and has been received will also be factored in our updating of the frequently asked questions that we plan to have available before the public hearing session on the 24th. How we are sharing information. In addition to the dedicated moratorium page, we made the draft regulations available on January 15th. And so we've emailed that to the interested parties to be able to review, comment, provide suggestions. The study session and the public hearing for tonight's meeting, the actual document noticing it was mailed out to all the property owners and addresses in the Transit Zoning Code in English and Spanish. The notice is also placed on the page. We published it in the OC Register, and we're using our channels to continue to inform our community. We have the neighborhood newsletter that goes out to 2,900 contacts through the community, including our neighborhood associations, leaders, advocacy groups, community-based organizations. We've also shared updates with the city's newly formed Environmental Justice Action Committee. They have had several community meetings around the EJ clusters. And we've had the community-based organizations part of that effort to inform, update, and present what's forthcoming to groups who are working on environmental justice issues. The residents from Logan and Lacey neighborhoods will be meeting before the public hearing. They are interested in having their own space and understanding and asking questions, so that will also be taking place. We thought this was really important to share with all of you in terms of what we have heard. We've heard a lot of concerns, but we wanted to articulate some of the key information that's been shared with us that we'd like for you to be made aware of. With regards to industrial and other businesses, real estate brokers, the concern is key. Negative impacts from the proposed regulations onto their businesses, their employees, and property values. The inability to pass their businesses on to future owners. The difficulty complying with any new or proposed operating standards. There is a position that's been articulated by most that we've heard, is that they are against any proposed amortization process. Concerns from recent property purchasers that have loan debt obligations present a difficult circumstance. The desire for having compensation associated with any phase out has been a preference that's been shared with us. The high cost of converting an existing building to be tenanted by a permitted use. So from industrial to residential, that cost involved is a concern. Modifying the proposed noxious uses section of the ordinance has been suggested to allow cleaner industrial uses and to continue businesses to operate as non-conforming. Lastly, concerns about the related traffic trespassing, vandalism, and the crime that's stemming from other nearby business operations or onto the public right-of-way near the schools, near the locations. 6th Street, East 6th Street is notorious for that. And we've also heard from other businesses where the metal recycling place, their equipment vehicles are having catalytic converters stolen and cashed in at the metal recycling place, which is a problem. And so again, this is a lot of concern, and we want again to make you aware of what we've heard from the businesses. Residents are tired of the ongoing problems with industrial and other businesses. They're concerned about the idling trucks, the noise, the weekend street blockages, the unpermitted uses, zoning violations, and health concerns that are presented with these ongoing problems. Residents are concerned about the increased traffic, the trespassing, vandalism, and crime, particularly near the schools. This is a shared comment with both industrial and residents. The concern of increased property values and cleaner businesses are hopeful, but displacement is still a concern due to rising rents. Confirmation that any proposed amortization does not apply to residents. Concerns have also been shared about the future of existing commercial and small businesses, businesses that are outside the overlay zones and are not industrial. Industrial and other workers who live in the area are concerned about job loss. Other comments include how proposed amendments affect owners from the lofts, the live-work units that are in the area. And residents want to continue to be informed about the proposed changes in English and Spanish. They've expressed that they want their space to be able to discuss and share concerns among themselves regarding the draft amendments. Now I will segue into the project discussion. So in the draft amendments that you have received, we've categorized them into 4 components. One is the map change, removal of the industrial zones M1, M2. A lot of work has been done on the non-conforming code provisions and operating standards. Updates to permitted uses and the new amortization process that gives the city a tool to be able to go after problematic businesses. This is the proposed map change without the M1, M2 overlay zones. There are no changes to the boundary of the transit zoning code. What is being recommended is that the overlay be removed. The second component has to do with new regulations for operation of existing legally established non-conforming industrial use. And this would cover general standards, enclosed operations, air emissions and dust, standards that address light, glare, and heat, ground vibration, outdoor storage and screening, hazardous materials, liquid and solid waste, the maintenance of those sites, trucks that are parking, loading, unloading, and hours of operation. There are further limits that are proposed on some rehabilitation of these buildings and structures, but there's specific emphasis on non-conforming industrial uses. This includes prohibiting the expansion of a building or a structure that's occupied by a non-conforming industrial use. There are provisions to the discontinuance of non-conforming noxious uses through thresholds triggered by code enforcement, code violations, or through the transfer of a business to a new owner. We have a section on the abatement of a public nuisance, and the draft amendment establishes an authority for voluntary compliance agreements between the city and the non-conforming uses. Regarding the updates to permitted uses, the draft amendments clearly state that new uses must comply with the permitted uses table that you will find on a section of your draft amendments package. It's very clear on the industrial noxious uses types that are deleted, such as, in example, mortuaries, funeral homes, and light manufacturing. The new uses are also consistent with the types of uses that are permitted can be retenant to an industrial type building that has been added. So the example that we give is the trade school. That's a new use that's consistent. And artisan craft production, limited on-site production is another type of specialized use that has been included in the table. Uses that are not listed in the permitted use table or explicitly listed as not permitted are not allowed. That is reflected in the draft amendment in this section, permitted uses. This would include noxious uses. And noxious uses require a permit from a regional, state, or federal agency. And these are for uses that handle, store, emit, or discharge particulate materials, exhaust emissions, or they handle, store, emit, or discharge regulated compounds, hazardous materials, chemicals, or substances that are located within 1,000 linear feet of a public park, school, or residential property. We have a new section on the amortization process. Once again, this is a tool available if other regulations that are intended to address these ongoing land use conflicts do not result in change. This is how we envision applying this new amortization process. And the idea would be to eliminate non-conforming uses and structures through amortization that involve a framework to amortize the non-conforming industrial businesses using data, metrics, operational characteristics. Having an independent third-party hearing officer that is involved in reviewing and determining what should be a reasonable amortization period. And this would be the period for terminating non-conforming uses or structures. The amortization period established for a non-conforming use or structure to be discontinued and removed from a site or sites. That is also included in this section. The hearing officer's role of making the determination and ensuring that it's complied with. And consequences for failure to comply with the hearing officer's determination. So now I want to take you to a big picture of what are we trying to accomplish here through the proposed regulations. We're trying to accomplish the goal of addressing the incompatible and irreconcilable land uses and the resulting conflicts. We are trying to lessen the strain on residents and reduce the constant demand of city resources, whether it's through code enforcement, through our city police department, fire, etc., who are responding to calls for service related to problematic industrial operations that are affecting the health and safety of neighborhoods. The goal of the proposed regulations also protect the health and safety and welfare of the existing and future residents of the Transit Zoning Code through the use of the new amortization process as a tool to phase out and discontinue higher polluting, non-conforming industrial uses in the community. An additional goal is to continue the transition of the Transit Zoning Code that started in 2010 to a transit-oriented mixed-use area primarily focused on compatible residential and commercial development by eliminating the incompatible industrial uses and establishing clear operational standards. Through these amendments, the goal is also to pursue solutions that foster the compatibility between residential and non-residential land uses so that we enhance livability and improve public health and quality of life in the Transit Zoning Code and in the city. We wanted to also share that the consistency of what we're proposing falls with the general plan because the proposed amendments are in alignment with numerous policies in our general plan that the City Council adopted in 2022. Land use policies around compatible uses, sensitive receptors, noxious, hazardous, dangerous, and polluting uses, air pollution buffers, sustainable land use strategies, healthy living conditions, community element of healthy neighborhoods, having a policy that responds to that, avoiding the conflicts of uses, and the sensitive receptor decisions. Again, these policies aim to correct past land use planning practices that have placed unequivocal environmental health burden on certain neighborhoods that are now termed to be disadvantaged communities. And there are multiple policies that support staff's implementation of council's policy direction. Now we will segue into what comes next. During the week of February 18th, which is next week, we are preparing to publish the staff report, the draft zoning ordinance, and the map amendments, the CEQA addendum to the SD 84 Transit Zoning Code Final Environmental Impact Report. Later next week, we will also publish our frequently asked questions that's being updated based on the feedback, comments, concerns that we are receiving from stakeholders. We will make that available on the project webpage, and we will also email our interested parties list on the updated FAQ. 2 weeks from tonight, we have the Planning Commission public hearing. And tentatively in March and April, we have the first, second reading at the City Council. Now, we would like to open it up for discussion among the planning commissioners tonight.
Thank you, Margarita. Does the commission have any questions or feedback for staff? Commissioner Benninger.
Well, I like to propose we take a 5-minute break right now. It's been a long time. And so let's take 5 minutes break and then come back to this.
That works. We'll take a 10-minute break. We'll be a little more, give ourselves a little bit of time. We'll be back at 7:36.
gonna happen for the rest of the meeting tonight? I'm thinking about.
Will the public be able to talk again or no?
Follow the agenda.
Or it's,
I think it's gonna pass. How do the commissioners?
I think it's the city council that votes on it, Dad, not the planning commission.
We'll get started once again. And we left off on, does the commission have any questions or feedback? All good. Does the commission have any questions or feedback for staff? Commissioner Bettinger.
Well, first of all, I want to thank all those that came out tonight and spoke, whether it be on the phone or speak in person. This is a highly complicated, very emotional subject. And I understand the feelings of the business owners as well as the residents. And this things throw out a couple things that we need not forget in the wash. One of them is the fact that there's 9, when I worked at Dow Chemical and I was involved with a lot of the environmental issues, we used to always say that there's 9 jobs that are supported by 1 production job. And that's the cleaners, the dentists, the doctors, the what have you, that depend on that worker to make the money, bring home the funds and support those. And so as we're talking about closing businesses, losing jobs, let's not lose fact. It's not those people losing jobs, but also who they support also that is lost in the mix. Those who feel getting rid of industry and only letting residentials take its place. I can only point to some of my beloved cities in Michigan. And who in 1972, when the EPA came in, obliterated a lot of industries in that state. And those cities right now, and parts of my beloved city of Detroit, are really wastelands today because people cannot live in those areas and make money and live in those areas. The house I grew up with for example, today sells for $12,000. My parents sold it in 1978. It was $25,000. So if we chase industry totally out of the city, that's what you're going to end up with on it, is blatant areas. Also, gentlemen talked about people breaking into businesses. I had the same problems. I shut down American Polystyrene, and we went a year and a half being vacated, and we lost all kinds of copper material no matter what we did. So I understand they don't want these buildings to sit empty and on development. And so, and also just add one thing, the lady talked about and I do appreciate and understand the residents. I appreciate the young lady talked about residents. But the other lady who put faith in the Department of Toxic Substance, I'm sorry. I fought those people many, many times, only to find out all they want to do is charge, charge, charge. And every time I get one of my projects into the EPA hands, I could get results. They just prefer to drag things out. And we have a good example of that right now in Delhi, where after 6 years, we still have 5 more years of study to go before they'll pump a bit of that groundwater out and start purifying it. That's crazy on it. But with that, to bring back a couple questions that I do have is, I don't know if, and this is kind of for staff, have we had joint meetings with industry, some of their leaders, a coalition, shall we say, between the neighborhoods and the industrial leaders to talk about some of these problems? Because I surely believe hauling trucks at night would be a nuisance, and it is something that we should be able to control, nature to control. So Marguerite, have you had meetings talking about these problems?
We've had several meetings with the industrial property owners and Mr. Andrade from the Logan neighborhood in the same room, listening to each other and at the same time presenting concerns, recommendations, feedback from the impacts, the effects to the businesses. So yeah, a lot of familiar faces tonight. And, but there is a desire for the residents, single family, live work units to have their own space. And so they're scheduling a meeting before the next public hearing so that they can also further digest the draft amendments in terms of what that means for them.
Have the city considered forming a coalition between the neighborhood and the industrials group?
Not forming a coalition, but being available to meet, to visit with the industry owner on site at their place to get familiar with the history. That has taken place from the October informational meeting to now. Not all of the businesses, but I think we've gotten from the business leaders here and the resident leaders, some here and some who have participated on the Zoom, we've been provided feedback. But it depends on what you are defining as coalition, but there has been communication for sure.
How have our environmental agencies, EPA in particular, air quality, what is their role in all of this? Have they not issued permits and don't they check on those permits?
A number of the industrial businesses within the overlay zones receive a permit from an outside regulatory agency like the ones that you have mentioned. And so they play a role. They issue the permit to be able to either operate the equipment or they may be enforcing, providing a notification. So we learn of that or we research that if we receive a complaint, but it's independent of what we're doing in terms of code enforcement or police responding to a call or a concern. But yes, all those agencies have a role in terms of issuing, notifying, and any enforcement.
Now, on those permits, especially when it comes to dust, there are certain criteria that you have to meet. Is there any testing being done in this area?
Testing that is done is what I would say from the regulatory agency staff. So they are doing their visit on the site and they're looking at records, for example. In terms of testing for chemicals, we haven't seen any study in particular, but we know that whenever there are notices, notifications, violations, any of that, it's supposed to be uploaded into that regulatory agency's website, and many times it's not current.
Because I can tell you when I have dealt with them, that they have power to give fines, shut me down, pull my permits if I was in violation. And so I don't know, they're taking a back seat right now, because I'm not going to sit here and say yeah, all the industrials are perfect. I don't think anyone out there will say the same thing. But if we have some bad actors that are disturbing the neighborhoods, that are putting dust in the air that shouldn't, I think all of us would see that as, yes, shut those down. Yes, take care of those, give them, notice and proceed. But what I read into this, and maybe I'm wrong, but I read in this is really just gutting industry in that area. And that kind of concerns me, without due test, without understanding what the problems are. And if we do have some bad actors, I know I was talking with Congressman Becerra talking about near the train station, and my simple thing to him is, if you're testing your car afterwards and it's being released in the area, then why not test it and find out what it is? And then go after the person that is doing that, rather than shutting down the entire area. So kind of my inputs. I do have one question coming off from this hearing official. Who is he and what is it, or she is, or what, can you explain more what you're proposing there?
The hearing officer?
Yes.
So as part of the amortization process, the hearing officer would be a third party, not someone who works for the city. It's not Min, Ali, or any of us, but that person would be presiding and hearing the information that the executive director or his designee, would be able to present that information and take that with a number of factors to determine, okay, what is the amortization period for this business?
What type of background would this person have? Or is that yet to be determined?
Do you go ahead, Lali?
Commissioner, as you just said, a lot of these things are yet to be determined, but the city's record with using hearing officers is that these are often professionals with relevant land use experience for the city, or they may be retired judges or persons with legal background. So they're professionals who work in the field, and they're contracted by cities on a regular basis for this sort of administration of a code.
Because it's the first time I heard reading it in this proposal, but it sounds like there have been hearing officers or are. It's well established.
It is well established. We do have, for example, code enforcement cases that are presented before a zoning hearing officer, and they're a third party now that's contracted.
That's all I have at this time.
Thank you. I just want to remind the commission that this is a work study session to ask clarifying questions, to get more information on what the code is, not a space to express personal opinions prematurely. So we're just asking questions. So Commissioner Scamilla.
I don't know if I'm going to be any better chair. Thank you. Yeah, no, I agree with my colleague here, Commissioner Benninger. This is obviously a very tough situation for everyone involved. It's going to be a balancing act for all of us, and that's kind of the line of questions that I have, just to try to figure out some of the details before we, I guess, see everybody again on the 24th, and then see everybody at the City Council session. So I guess, just to start off, because I think that this is going to be extremely useful, is do we have a really kind of good detailed inventory of the types of businesses and uses being impacted within the zone? So just, total number of businesses. I know you can probably pull this with Mark Morley and their office over there, potential sales tax impacts to the location, again, just because I know that we don't individually know who sells what, but I think Morley is one of the people that in the city has access to some of that data that can get aggregated so that we can know the underlying tax implications from this work and what types of businesses would be impacted. I do think that also having a more detailed understanding of the exact types of uses, right? So if we're looking at, this is M1, M2, are we mostly looking at warehouse uses? Are we looking at a certain percentage? I would say both on a square foot basis, as well as number of businesses and number of employees. I believe the employees will probably be a little bit harder to pull in time for the 24th, but that is also very good information to have as you kind of weigh out different decisions. I know that the kind of ordinance, or not the ordinance, but the item before us does describe kind of a ranking of various potential noxious uses and kind of where enforcement might be, more warranted and really just kind of a higher priority. So having a little bit more detail on kind of what that criteria would look like, I think would also be good to understand, because I can definitely see how the moving of, mostly, I guess, okay, construction debris, but, quite honestly, all construction debris is not great to put into the air next to a school. That is probably a different sort of situation when that is, you have kind of direct measurable impacts that you can basically look to say that this is a higher priority for the city and really kind of at the core of the purpose of this whole exercise. I think that information is definitely needed. So those are just kind of initially what I would like to see, hopefully by the 24th, but it is a lot to ask by the 24th, I know, but at least by the time it makes it to council, I think that information should be at least summarized or readily available. So that's where I'm starting off. Number two, I guess a question for staff on this is, at this point, we have a moratorium in place, and it's almost, from my understanding, everything is kind of on pause. That either way, we would, I guess the question is, right now, no one is being issued any kind of occupancy permits. There's no one signing off on any kind of installation of equipment, right? Like everything is pretty much on pause within these two or within the overlay zones at this point.
The moratorium, in a nutshell, is on the establishment, intensification, or enlargement of industrial businesses in the area. So routine permits, like let's say replacement of equipment that's been damaged and needs to be replaced, that's not something that's affected by the moratorium, or obviously non-commercial, non-industrial businesses are not affected by the moratorium.
Okay, thank you. And I guess just another more high-level question is, I know as part of the general plan, there was the introduction of kind of this flex space model that was meant to be a combination of both residential and industrial, but but very much like in a kind of clean, non-impactful. These uses can be kind of overlapped with each other. I don't know if there are any lessons or applicable kind of allowable uses where it makes sense that we are doing this essentially what will be on the other side of the streetcar line there by Rate and oh my gosh. Rayton First and all the way up to Rayton Santa Ana Boulevard. So that entire zone is kind of meant to be or was encouraging kind of a flexible use of land uses next to each other. So I don't know kind of, one for one how those work out, right? So if we're essentially saying that, that's okay there, is it okay over here, right? So I want a little bit of understanding as to how we're kind of pursuing these two policies next to each other, because the other community is still an existing residential community as well. So I just want to be equitable on that end. So just making sure that standards are pretty set across the board. I do think for purposes of this discussion, the emphasis maybe, and I don't know if it came through in the presentation for the general audience, but I am seeing a major difference, at least between M1 uses and M2 uses. And I know that they're very close to each other, but you have a very hard time accepting any kind of, what is, I think, a battery manufacturing plant that is allowable under M2 zoning, right? So there's additional, I think, considerations there just to kind of lay out that there is probably a substantial difference between the allowable uses that in the current regulations for M1 versus the M2 allowances, which are pretty hard to place next to schools and next to a higher density residential or just even lower density or any type of residential. So those are kind of initial observations. I think we should definitely take seriously the takings argument. So I don't know how that is necessarily going to be handled, but it maybe comes in with the hearing office and the hearing process itself, because I would imagine that that's where the actual taking, if it was to occur, would be kind of at that phase. Although I don't know if there is any initial estimate as to what the potential liability would be for the city as far as economic losses in the area. So again, those are all pieces of information that I think would be useful to have as the process moves forward. And then I think the other question that came up that I'm also kind of curious about, maybe I think, oh my gosh, Margarita alluded to it or actually mentioned it, is that we will actually have some CEQA documentation and an environmental impact report on this proposal. I just don't know if we, on the 18th? The addendum, okay. So we'll see an addendum before the next one?
Yes, that will be part of the documents that will be published and are for next week, next Tuesday.
Is that, okay, thank you.
And it is an addendum to the CEQA. It's an addendum to the final EIR of the transit zoning code that was conducted in 2010.
Okay, perfect. Let's see. So I can still go on for probably another 10 minutes unless you want me to. Okay, we can keep. Okay, so I'll try to get them all then. So EIR, on this is page 3 of 38 on the ordinance. We're looking at, I guess, let's see, I'm looking at, let's see, section 3, subsection A, section 3 again, just on the outdoor screening walls. So our overall code in industrial and commercial zones allows for up to 10 feet walls in height. So I'm just wondering why that's only 8 there. I understand that, there could be a difference, but to me, just put it up 10 feet, make it decorative after, the first 6 feet or something. I think that's a pretty nice balance to have there. The modern signage requirements, and this is something that you'll probably know from me and my love of old signs, is I don't necessarily like our sign code. So, keeping up to modern standards for some of these signs. I'm going back to the Hills Garage, I think, example in this particular neighborhood that has a really cool old sign. And, by this code, it would definitely be removed in order for any kind of updates to occur. So any sort of historic appreciation of signage, I think is maybe worth looking at there. I say that as a member of the Historic Commission. If I can get a more robust definition of what intensification will entail. I know that it's in there probably in some other section of the code, but just laying that out there, because I think that's one of the big trigger points here. I'm kind of curious as to why we also then, I guess, page 4 added a segment on no increase in the number of dwelling units. I see that as kind of unrelated to the industrial use of the site. I also know that we probably don't, as a city, take advantage of the caretaker unit clause. I think, everyone that has an industrial building, you can add like one housing unit to it, no problem, because there's a caretaker clause in the code. But I guess I just don't see why section 11 is there. If that could be explained, totally cool. I just don't know why it's there. Let's see. Good there, noxious uses. Sorry, I'm just trying to get through all these pages, and there were quite a bit of pages. Discontinuance. So I guess more generally, and I don't know if any process or procedures in place to track permitting from the state and federal regulators. So I know that that is one of the trigger points. So if there are any ways that we can kind of automate that process, because I know kind of relying specifically on the business owners themselves might not be consistent. So we definitely want to be consistent, but it would probably give us better coverage if there is some sort of automated process that we can work with the relevant state, federal, and other regional partners on that. Let's see. Amortization period. And I guess with the amortization period, I know it's probably going to be the more controversial aspect. So I think the last experience that the city had with amortization was around long-term hotel rentals, right? So it's effectively SROs. And so we did this, I think, in like 2000s or like the 90s, where there was an amortization process. So maybe I'm not sure if we want to see that as a model, but I know it kind of will probably set a baseline for the types of programs that the city will be looking at through that period. So I know that's going to require some more info, and I'm probably going to have to come back with some questions on that because that is the big one. Let's see. And I think to Carl Veninger, Commissioner Veninger's point, knowing a little bit more about what that hearing officer will entail, I think will be good. Even if it's just those other cities and those other examples, I think will be good for the council to understand. Let's see, page 18, section G at the top, just again, curious as to, I guess I understand the conversion of existing structures containing residential land uses to non-residential land uses is prohibited in UN1 and UN2 zones. I guess I'm just kind of curious about that because again, in a mixed use area, I think allowing for the open conversion between office space, professional, residential, and allowing that to kind of be a little bit more flexible is kind of what the intent is in a mixed use area. So I wouldn't necessarily put a hard block on it either way. I just think that it should be flexible at to the greatest extent possible. So that to me is like a limiting factor that I don't necessarily see the purpose of here. Though again, if it's a larger conversation around making sure that properties are not converted to industrial use, I think that's already kind of taken off the table if the overlay goes away. So that's kind of where my questions are coming up from as far as that section G. Let's see. I think we might have some opportunities still on table 2A if there are other compatible expandable uses. Again, looking to that flex zone section for what might still work. I think that's kind of the section where the conversations with property owners, with kind of small scale artisan manufacturers, those types of conversations. I think that that's where we might have opportunities for additional flexibility. Though again, because of where we are in the process, it's still doable, but we need to really look to see that information in a very short time frame. And this is just something that Mr. Escalante is not here anymore, or he walked out of the room. But it reminded me, at least for page 19, on I understand the removal of auto or motor vehicle servicing. I think just in general in a downtown, it's not the type of use that you're looking for. But I do know that there's kind of this entire kind of subsection of older, historic, you'd say kind of specialized manufacturing that's around auto repair, but it's like a very much like, again, to Robert Escalante's use, which I think is outside of this area anyways, deals with Packards, right? And deals like in a very small scale, 4 to 5 cars at a time, historic Packards with the specialized equipment necessary to do that. I think that maybe is a little bit, there should be a little more flexibility there. Let's see. Yeah, I think same thing with the tattoo and art establishments, and it's permitted everywhere else, but if someone in a U2 area wants to run a tattoo shop, I guess I know that we barely let them back into the code back probably 2014 or something. But it is something that I don't necessarily see as being incompatible with the area if that's going to be taken out. Wondering what the removal on page 20 of extended care uses does to the hospital that we have there in French Court. So it's still within the transit zoning code. If we no longer have extended care, I don't know if it comes in as a hospital or if it's extended care. But if that's going to make it harder for that particular use and other similar kind of extended care and end of life sort of businesses to operate there. Because again, I don't see the incompatibility of those types of operations with the neighborhood. And if we're all trying to get down to compatibility, I don't necessarily see the reason for the removal of the extended care. Let's see. I actually agree with the observations from the residents on the expansion of existing legal and self-storage facilities. I would agree with the removal of that as an option. If we're going to have it, we should have it, and not just in U2 locations. It seems like something you'd have in other locations. It's just a little weird that it's standing there as a conditional use permit, specifically within the areas that are most likely to be residential, which is again just a little odd with that designation. Yeah, if we could have more info on kind of how we arrived, page 22, section D or item D, just on that decibel reading. So I know that there was that observation that even now with my soft-spoken voice, I'm probably exceeding by many decibels the requirement here. So that would be something to take a look at that we'd want to know a little bit more about. Let's see, non-conforming. And then I'm just going to need more time to review section 11 and have questions for you all, because I think that that's where we're adding the most. Let's see. Okay, and that's what I have for right now. And then I'm going to go look at the other papers right now. Okay.
Commissioner Leo.
First of all, thanks for all the work that you put into it. There appeared to be in the slides some agreed upon issues. I think we should start there. After being around in the city for long enough, I feel like we're taking a sledgehammer to something we can use a scalpel for. I almost feel like we're throwing it all out. This statement is what throwing the baby out with the bathwater. It's very difficult to understand how we've had this compatibility issue for decades, but yet it's never risen to this level, to the point where now we're going to wipe out potentially 130 some odd businesses. So I would definitely start with the agreed upon issues. That's where I'd start. Second of all, I don't see anything in here that says we need to pull all the regulatory bodies together. If you're waiting for a business to give it to you, or you're waiting for some outside body to give it to you, that doesn't help. The county owns land in this space. They should be providing you with whatever permits they have to issue. AQMD should be providing what they do. These businesses have to get those permits. So there should be a way to get that information to you, so you know who the good actors are and who the bad actors are. I mean, over and over and over again, we heard 3 bad actors. Well, okay, what have we done over the past 10 years to those 3 bad actors? The amortization process is a beast unto itself. I have lots of questions around it, but that's for another day. Someone needs to talk to the school district. If I understand correctly, Garfield has 509 students. They have declining enrollment. Is there a reason this Garfield is still open? I mean, if we're going to build this out, why is the school still there? That's useful land.
the underlying question really is about the intensification of the land. Because as soon as you intensify the land, you get traffic, which is another complaint that residents will have. So for me, it's start with what we agreed upon, what the parties agree upon. Second of all, pull all the regulatory bodies into a room, and if you need us up here to contact the state assembly offices and Senate offices and the congressional offices, pull all the regulatory bodies into a room and find out really what's wrong. Because a lot of it is a generalized statement. Oh, there's too much dust, there's too much this, or too much that. But are they in violation or not? Right? Hours of operation is an issue. That can be resolved. How many businesses operate really late? How many don't? I mean, I get the sense like, okay, I'm going to fix 100 years of incompatibility and mishmash, and I'm going to fix it with a sledgehammer and call it environmental justice. I was around when the Kennedy Elementary School, the water had lead in it. We didn't close the Kennedy Elementary School. We cleaned the water. So this is my bigger concern, and I know other commissioners have the same feeling, is we have to balance the economics of it, and I know we're not supposed to in the planning commission, with the residents. We have to figure this out. And I just feel like we're running at this thing, and I know you guys have been working at it, but my issues are like, you could really economically damage the city if we're not careful. If we're not careful on how we do this. If the residents have issues, we'll work with the time and the hours of operation. We'll figure out a permitting process. We'll continue the meetings. I think it was Commissioner Benninger said, people need to talk to each other. So I think that my initial read is I have real issues with amortization. I think we're gonna get sued. The takings, and I'd love to hear from the lawyer what they think about the regulatory taking if we wipe these businesses out, because we're making it tough. As a lawyer, I don't know how we argue that issue. It's going to be difficult. And then the hearing officer's got to be either a retired judge or somebody who's got real expertise. It can't just be somebody that has land use experience, because you're balancing economics of 50 employees, 75 employees versus what we're going to put there. So I think for me, it's start with the agreed upon issues, fix those first. Maybe some of the other issues will go away. Second of all, let us know how we can pull all the regulatory bodies together to help you get the list of permits or the lack thereof. Third of all, someone's got to talk to the school district. Are they going to keep those schools open or not? Fourth, I've got real issues with the amortization process. And fifth, the intensification of the land has to be open to the public, and people need to know what we're going to do, because the residents may say, I don't want 3-story, 4-story apartment complexes. I want single family homes, and that's going to be an issue. So those are my issues right now.
Commissioner Wu.
Thank you, Senior Planner Margarita, for your presentation. I really appreciate it. It gave me clarity to understand something that our study session is supposed to do and the questions we need to ask. So along that line, I got some questions. Number one, this draft transit code regulation, was this presented to the public before tonight?
The draft amendments were shared with the public. We shared it with the interested parties list, the business owners that we've been meeting. Yes, they've had it.
And copies were outside there?
Yes, outside of this venue, like for people who are attending this
Yeah.
meeting. Yes,
And was the study session proposed amendment also distributed prior to today's meeting?
yeah, the proposed amendments and the PowerPoint, they're available. Today we posted the PowerPoint, but the amendments have been on the webpage since
Okay.
January 15th.
The Environmental Justice Group, do they have funding where they have a higher paid staff to staff them?
Which environmental justice group?
The
Commissioner?
one with Madison and what's his name over there in, the east side of town.
Oh, you're talking about the Green MPNA?
Yeah,
Yes, they're a nonprofit organization and they receive funding to do
yeah, the
research.
Madison group, right?
Yes, and then OCEJ is the other organization that,
It seemed to me in the last 40 years, the Artesian Pilar neighborhood has brought up a similar issue regarding the cement factory that was 2 blocks away from where I was living at the time. And there was a tamale, the tamale lady had a tamale shop right across the street from that same cement factory. We also have complained about the junkyards on Fifth Street until La Cinco got built. And we thought we would have gotten rid of all the junkyard, but we didn't. So we have this process now for this specific area. Will it apply to other areas of the city?
what's being recommended would apply to the transit zoning code area.
So you would have to be in the transit zone area. So this is specifically for this area and this transit zone.
Correct.
How is it overlaid on a general plan then?
The overlay is in
Yeah.
the transit zoning code. I'm not sure I understand your
So it's
question.
like a specific area plan, right? Is the way we
Yes,
look at it?
specific development for the transit
Yeah.
zoning code only, yes.
And it seemed that also what you've done here is to give us a process to bring the different opinions together, business and residents, to look at it, to be able to sort it out and have a process of moving forward. Am I right about that?
Yeah, part of the meeting tonight and the previous meetings with constituents has been to raise awareness and inform people that this is something very complex and there's effects with everyone. But yes, the intent is to inform our community about it, tonight to inform and get questions from you as commissioners so that we continue. We continue as we prepare for the public hearing and then what happens after.
And it's specified in a way to handle it is that we will have a hearing officer, and we have hearing officer for a variety of different things. Now, the only thing that I don't find here is how to reach common ground, which was brought up several times by other commissioner. We have a process for adjudicating it through an amortization process, which at first that word just kind of frightened me, but now that I understand it a little better, I can understand that. What I find troubling is that we heard speeches from residents and we heard speeches, business, but we don't know what kind of businesses that are there. Which one of you are in compliance? Which one of you are not in compliance? Which one are you continue to be polluting to heck with everyone? I'm going to continue burning things and I'm going to put toxic things in the air. Do we know that out of the 130 businesses, what percentage are tattoo parlors, which is on page 11 that Commissioner Escamilla pointed out to? You spell out the different categories, right? But it would help me to see how many of the 130 businesses existing operating there. And the property owner falls into what category, which one will be governed by conditional use permit, as I say here, or that they be subject to other ways of resolving their issue if they're not in compliance. Now, does that beg the question then, that if they're in compliance, if they spend money building things that clean the air before it gets out into the neighborhood, they have made a reasonable effort to comply and not affect the health of the community? And does that mean that if they've done that, they should be able to still continue their business? Now, if they're able to continue the business, what happens at the end when they want to sell that business? Now, that's the big thing that we haven't found a solution to. We haven't found an answer. Maybe it's more complex than today that we could do. But that's something I would like to see as an answer to. Should there be a plan that if we are going to eliminate businesses, which you definitely are not saying that you intend to do that. You're just specifying what is conformity, what is not, and how to deal with non-conforming. So you're giving us process, okay? Which is great, thank you.
I'd just like to provide some
Okay.
clarification.
Please.
For you and the others on the Planning Commission. So the M1, M2 uses that would not be allowed in the proposed permitted uses would become non-conforming. They'd become non-conforming industrial uses. There is a new definition on page 34 that explains that. So we're talking about a use established on any parcel, any building located in the SD 84 boundary that no longer would be permissible through the amendment of this article. So they fall under that category of non-conforming industrial use. And so even though they're not allowed on the permitted uses table, they still exist.
Right.
The amortization is a tool. Let's say we have some of these that are bad operators that we can use that we currently do not have to be able to build on. I mean, some of these businesses we have been going through our code enforcement process. But the big concern is that what if I lose my legal non-conforming status? So if I lose it by selling my business, because if I am a noxious use business, I get a permit from AQMD or any other regulatory agency, and I am in violation of it, which is difficult just in my experience working with the regulatory agent. It's a lot of times they will not enforce. They would rather work with businesses to be able to, give them time. And that's why situations like the groundwater cleanup in the South Basin has taken a lot of time because it involves coordination. It's really complex. In this case, that is the root of the question. What is my status? What operational standards pertain to me? So for the legal for the non-conforming industrial uses, there are extra operating standards that pertain to that. And so it's
So let's slow down
okay.
because I'm having trouble following because there's so much to take in at once, okay? And I'm not doing that on purpose, okay? I just want to really make sure everyone hears what you say. The industrial M1 and M2 will be removed if we adopt this in 2 weeks.
You would recommend to the city council, if that recommendation, it would be to update the map to remove the overlay zones, M1, M2 in the transit
There's
zoning
agreement
code.
on the commission to do so.
Right.
Okay. So the second part is once that is done, whichever way it goes, that,
If I can make a correction,
please.
the commission has not made any decision in terms of what proposed regulations tonight. Tonight's purpose is for a study session. Your question, I think, was asking if the commission has made an agreement. I just want to clear, commission has not made any decision, have not provided any
Oh, no, I
unified
wasn't
directions
asking
to
us
staff.
about tonight making decision. I'm saying when we have the public hearing in 2 weeks, what will be asked for us? And will that be removed at that point if we pass it or don't pass it, right? You know,
It would be a recommendation to the city council.
to the council and they act on it. Okay, I got it. That's the distinction. Okay. Now, on the non-conforming use, you were explaining that. And so if in removing that, and my property become non-conforming, that goes through that amortization process. Or how do I follow that?
Just because a use becomes under this non-conforming industrial uses definition does not mean that it's an automatic amortization. The amortization tool will help the city evaluate uses that are in that category that, let's say, we've not been able to resolve and address the land use conflict issues and the impacts to neighborhoods. We now have that as a tool that we currently do not have. So that's the hearing officer, the process, which is new. It's new for this proposed amendment in this area to employ that. But the city has worked with third-party hearing officers to be involved in making determinations on a number of situations. But this would be for the amortization period that should be determined by this hearing officer, should the city want to pursue that with the non-conforming industrial use.
So, if this, well, when we discuss it in 2 weeks, does non-conforming mean I could still continue my business?
Yes, businesses will remain non-conforming.
They just don't
They-
conform with,
Although they need to be able to meet the proposed operating standards, and there are some standards that pertain to the non-conforming uses.
so you could be non-conforming, yet meet all the standard of like,
Yes.
no car, no noxious waste, noise and all that, right? Is that what
Yes.
I'm reading?
Yes, and there are some businesses that are not a noxious use business, but they're a non-conforming industrial use, and they would continue if and they would have the opportunity to meet the operational standards.
So I would like to see, a list that conform with page 11 around there, that chart there, of those that the percentage of that are not industrial, the percentage of polluters and non-polluters and, other kinds of businesses categorized. So, when we look at saying there's 130 businesses, they're not 130 industrial businesses. So when residents call attention to the crematorium, which there's probably a lot of consistency, people thinking that that is a polluter, they may not be thinking of someone that may be operating a dye company, dyeing sheets, right? Or someone that got a weaving shop, or they're weaving sweaters, which is also industrial work.
Understood. I think what I hear from the commission is that you want to see, returning back to you out of these 130 businesses, is further clarification as to what type of business they are, what are their processes, what are some of the permits that they require from outside agency, and how do they fall into each category of non-conforming, noxious
Yeah.
use,
Because it
industrial.
seems like we're making generalities, and we also seem on the business side, I don't know what's happening. And in the not knowing what's happening, that fear, you're thinking personally of your own business and all that. But if we knew the steps and things, and we knew a little more about what would be happening, we may, as a business owner, I may want to, side with the residents if we could achieve that purpose without it negatively impacting, because I'm not a troublemaker. The guy that is using Roundup and spreading it all over this lawn, that's the one we should go to, that come from that chemical company that Commissioner Benninger worked for. Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, I'm sorry for monopoly of time in terms of the question, because I thought we were supposed to ask questions so that we could fully understand it. And I was asking some of this for clarification, because while your presentation is very good and very understandable, sometimes we get caught up in the large words, at least I did. I want to hear it simply, and I know that you often do that with us, and I thank you for that.
I have a question on the amortization process. Is there a city that we're looking at that has used this process and has been to an extent successful, for lack of a better word? Is there, what are we basing this process off of?
So this is, in terms of the amortization concept, it's not a new land use concept. It's one that has been used by many cities throughout the state, throughout the nation for addressing land use issues. What I can share is that in my experience, and even within our own city, we have amortization regulations. What is being tailored for this process is a way of creating an enabling process for us to begin evaluating amortization of conflicting land uses. So this is certainly something that is what you would call precursor to amortization, but it does enable the process to begin amortization. Many codes that we have seen have actual dates that are often tied with a very detailed evaluation and study of the type of uses to be amortized. It also identified the specific uses to be amortized. In this case, the ordinance is not doing to that level. What it does is that it establishes the enabling process to begin that. And when the city make the decision to engage in that process, that's when the individual businesses are then evaluated with further studies on the type of issues that are associated with that business, the type of investment that's been put into a project, and evaluate what potentially is an equitable return to a business on an amortization period. And therefore, there's a third party presiding officer that the city would be employing in this process to allow the third-party transparency, but also the objectivity on the information being presented. So it's not true amortization in terms of from day one, certain businesses are going to be removed. From day one, certain businesses are identified as to be amortized. It is an enabling process.
And thank you for the clarification. Echoing what the commission has already said, there has to be more conversation between the residents and the business owners. I feel like there should be one joint meeting before the 24th public hearing we'll be having. I don't know if there's time for that, or if the businesses and the residents are open to that joint meeting. I understand that the residents want to have their individual, like, to an extent, closed session meeting, just so that they can talk through their issues, what they want to see. But I think it would be beneficial just for a joint meeting, just for that clarification, for that communication, for that transparency, for some sort of relationship. I think there needs to be, a joint meeting. Commissioner Wu.
Margarita, when you have the meeting with the residents, could they be more specific by saying truck traffic? Does a truck belong to a specific business, or it could be truck that's traveling from the 5 and cutting across the neighborhood, and we don't know. I mean, I get a lot of trucks going through my neighborhood. Mostly they're Amazon, drivers. PS. So I'm just hoping for more clarity rather than generalities.
Yeah, and I can help clarify. The trucks that have been referenced are tied to businesses in the transit zoning code. And it's
Right.
the hours, blocking the streets in the neighborhood, weekends,
And
noise.
if it's a business truck in the neighborhood, they probably are identifiable.
Right, they're next to each other.
Yeah.
So you've got the business next to the home, and you have that happening. Chair Oliva, I just wanted to add that other cities that we've looked at in terms of amortization, for sure, National City, they have that, they've employed that for quite some time. Azusa is a small city that has use that to address some of the uses. And the County of Los Angeles is also another local regional area that uses those tools.
Thank you for the clarification. Any other commissioners with questions? Commissioner Benninger?
I'd just like to add, I think there's a lot of, there's a lot of stuff being put in here that we've not seen before, which is what adds to some of the confusion. But I really would like to know, what does this ordinance do? If I have a business, I want to turn it over to my son, let's say, sell it to a family member, am I able to do it the way this ordinance is being proposed? And so I think examples like that would help us understand what are we really voting on, per se, on it. Is that ban on business completely in the area or not? I think we're hung up on the word nonconformity versus operations. So what you're really saying, a business may be on non-conforming, but it's still going to be able to function in the area. I think that's a clarification we need. What does this ordinance really do as far as it goes?
Commissioner Escamilla?
All right, thank you. I thought there was going to be a response there. Sorry, back to the sheet.
Provide a response to that. So depending on the type of business, the non-conforming section is broken up into a couple different buckets. So if the business that you're speaking of, Commissioner, falls into a non-conforming industrial business, you would be able to pass the business along or sell the property just like any other non-conforming business currently. If the business is considered a noxious use, there'd be different triggers that would be applied to that type of business. And those are the types of businesses that would be subject to their non-conforming status when the business is transferred to a new owner.
So what you're also telling me is that if I'm not violating anything, I'm non-conforming, I can sell the business to anyone?
If the business does not meet the definition of a noxious use, but rather meets the definition of a non-conforming industrial use, it would be as currently proposed.
All right. Okay, thank you. Yeah, that's an important clarification. All right. Oh my gosh. Okay, so starting from the top again, I don't know if we need to explain it, but there was at least one small edit to the underlying general plan land use over at the train station. So I like it, support it fully, but I don't know if we have to mention it just because it is the only use that's changed. I'm not sure if it's just a parcel adjustment, so it's kind of getting redone. So I don't know if we have any answer on that one. It's the only edit that you have between the two. So I'm not sure if you just made the map different. But the northern section where I think the city had planned doing like a housing development like years ago as part of the Renaissance plan, it was all institutional and now it's going to district center. You just made a small edit there.
Other than removal of the overlay zones from the map, there's no proposed other land use
But there
changes.
is.
So
Yeah.
if there's a discrepancy on the map that you've identified, we'll look into it and make sure that the ordinance is clear in that regard.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, because there is a change. There's definitely a little adjustment there. Okay, that's good to know. Let's see. That's one. I'm just wondering if we can, and for some of the, obviously there's some kind of consistent themes from the public comments from the local business owners and community members. I'm not sure if it would be, if you're going to be able to have specific responses available to some observations that were brought up, either maybe it is the frequently asked questions segment, but just so that we have like those answers to us. I think that'd be best for everybody. It would also include at least a more robust review of the suggestions brought in by Mr. Adams. So, I think that, if we're having like a robust, line by line code section submittal, I think it deserves additional review in more detail just to kind of see how that would work. And if, there are any good ideas in there to kind of pull for additional clarification language. So I know that we got that, or I got that this afternoon. So I will probably be taking a closer look at that. So just making sure we do that. Let's see. Well, I put down a note and I already forgot what it said, so let's just skip that one. Include. If we can just include, whatever those reports are that we're kind of alluding to, whatever code enforcement has on file for the district, if we can just have those kind of at the ready, either if it is, 7, 8, 20, obviously, any kind of summary of the actual code enforcement and other issues that have been identified. I think that's worth having there, especially as the conversation will continue to grow as we get closer to city council's session. Let's see. I think there was a section and I couldn't find it in the draft. I know I saw it and I just I lost the page, but there was one section that limited driveway use immediately adjacent to residential. So I think it might be good to understand kind of what properties will be impacted by that, because I can kind of imagine what they are, but it is whoever's doing GIS for y'all now. It is just residential combined with industrial, and then we can see kind of where those buffers are. Though I think it's going to be the use of the current use rather than the underlying zone is probably, I think, what we would be looking at, right? Is whatever is residential and has a business operating next to it. Those are the areas that they won't be able to kind of bring cars in and out. And again, it's in your draft. Need to identify that page. Let's see. Page 5. Oh, perfect. Yeah, I guess page 5 then. Thank you. Now, as far as like tracking ownership changes, so I guess it's relatively easy when, we have, Bob Smith sells to, Jason Smith, like that's relatively easy to track. But, if we're doing any kind of corporate sales, is this something where, someone can buy and sell a corporation without necessarily changing anything? And maybe it might just be a change of principal agent, what is kind of, if there is a loophole, let's understand it. If we want to keep it open, that's a policy decision. But if we can reasonably foresee that any name change will be triggering these reviews, we can anticipate that people will try to avoid it if at all possible, because it is just an extra step. But so whatever review process we have in place to kind of track ownership changes, I think that would be good to know before we start trying to track ownership changes. Let's see. I guess on page 20 of 38, just another quick aside on allowable uses. It seems like media production, either office or storefront type, should be allowed by just should be permitted in that U2 zone. I guess I just don't see the offense of a media production area, but I understand, again, just most of those areas are going to allow for professional administrative offices by right. I don't see the difference between a professional administrative office and a media office. I do, in fact, think that a lot of our professional office will be used for more creative uses anyways. So you might classify one thing as another, but I guess I just don't see the difference or why there would need to be additional conditional use permit review for media production. If it's already, you're allowed to have an office and professional administrative, uses in that zone below it. So that's just another area of potential review. Oh, so for number 8, and this is where it might be a little bit of an aside. So we are looking at obviously the M1 and M2 zones within the transit zoning code, but immediately north of the transit zoning code and still, you'd say extremely adjacent to potential future uses, we still have an M1 and M2 island. So I don't know if we're looking at that just in order to, again, prevent any reasonable, if we move kind of all this and we just end up with a new, oh my gosh, waste hauling facility just immediately north of it, does that really kind of defeat the purpose if you still allow an island of M2 activity? Less concerned about the M1 uses there, but again, just because of the adjacency to residential, M2 uses are a little bit worrying for me, and especially if we're looking at this kind of holistically throughout the whole city. But again, it might be outside of the scope of this particular action. I think we need probably, and again, because this might be where a lot of businesses might fall into, metrics for what qualifies as artisanal construction, right? So whether or not that's square footage basis, particular use of chemicals or not, whatever those metrics are, I think it's best to understand that before carving out this exemption, saying that this is the exemption for all these smaller uses, but then not really fully fleshing out what those uses potentially could be. And I think that's what I have. Oh, and I also take back an earlier question that I had, because apparently the Washington Hospital is in the French Park zone and not in the transit zoning code. That is my mistake. Yeah. Yeah, no.
Commissioner Leo, any?
Just,
Oh,
I'm sorry, just to quickly respond, the industrial properties that you discuss to the north of the transit zoning code, while we would like to address it, unfortunately, it's beyond the scope of this moratorium action.
No further questions.
Commissioner Wu.
You know, Assistant City Manager Min and Ollie and Senior Planner Margarita, you know, undoing the past is an artist's Herculean job. You know, in the past, we have very many inconsistency. We have also intentional oppressions of neighborhoods that were disadvantaged. And that's our history. Despite that, those families survived and fought and you know, worked on their neighborhood, and they try to preserve the neighborhood integrity, you know. That was one of the reasons I was hired to kind of direct the Santa Ana Neighborhood Organization. And I know that those those that have generations of family members that were here before the boundaries changed, may not have the education level or economic successes other new people arriving in the neighborhood, and who may be more articulate, say, we demand this, we want environmental justice. That may not look at how people have learned to live together with each other, find common ground to build something that we could have both healthy neighborhoods, but also healthy neighborhoods with jobs. One thing that we are going to be facing in the next 10 years is an uncertain economy. And I'm fearful of those hardworking people in our community not having the job security that they have been used to doing. That someone took them in, taught them a trade, and got them a job, and then they were able to send their kids to college. That's the dream that we still all have. So there got to be, I'm hopeful, and I'm not trying to take side between one and the other. There's a lot of good arguments on both sides, but I think we need to work together. And we're not working together if we're not hearing what the other person is saying. And I leave it in your hand because I know that you set up those meetings where you do that.
Thank you, Commissioner Wu. I don't have any additional questions, so Commissioner Scamilla? Okay, one more.
Sorry, thank you. So I guess two things. So I guess number one, one of the items that was brought up by one of the business owners was around, you know, they have a 24-hour sort of type of operation, and you know they make no more noise than just like, you know, whatever it takes for, you know, obviously the car to enter and exit, and I guess that's the generation of noise from that particular facility. I don't know really, you know, the real on the ground situations, right? We haven't sent out a noise monitor to done any kind of noise study for it, but it might be worth looking into what types of additional review for those types of uses, right? So if there is an industrial use that requires, you know, slightly earlier hours within reason, within reasonable noise clarifications, I don't know if that's one of the potential balancing acts of we have to have a formal review once you start operating any business outside of your regular hours. You know, you say during your regular hours of operation, just like we do with late night eateries, you know, you have to go through a review to operate beyond those hours in these even non-conforming sites. So I don't know how one might tackle that, but that could be at least a mechanism to keep out bad actors and allow just, you know, good faith actors to to be able to have a reasonable use of their facilities. So that's just one thought. Again, because it would probably only be for new uses and maybe doesn't apply here, but that's sort of the type of balancing act that, is there anything we can do where there are reviews by this body that would make sense as we try to kind of, you know, fix these incompatibilities here. So I think that that's kind of some of the thought process I'm leaning into. And then there are even, I think, existing industrial uses that are not within the industrial overlay zone. So I just wanted to, and sorry if it's anyone's business, but that's here in the audience, but 1327 North Poinsettia. So it's right next to the water tower. According to the map and everything else, it's not in the overlay zone, but I'm seeing a bunch of like diesel trucks just like clogging up the street right in front of it, with a bunch of like kind of towing activity, it looks like there, or some kind of like dispatch yard. So I don't know what we're doing to also then to just look at proactively identify the areas that aren't even within the overlay zone that have existing industrial uses. So I think there's maybe some additional information there that could be provided to us. And I guess I would be remiss as a pro-housing person to let the disparagement of multifamily residential units go unaddressed. I think that right now the modern luxury home is a single-family detached residential, which the average cost in the county of Orange is now over $1 million, and that lower-cost townhomes, condos, and multifamily rental units are in fact the way that people in my generation are able to stay within the city. And to say otherwise, I think, is disingenuous. And so anyways, I'll leave with that. I know we're not supposed to talk about other things, but if we're talking about land uses and the future development of this area, and higher density, close to transit, that is kind of the vision for the city. And it's a vision that we're trying to figure out how to balance.
Commissioner Bettinger.
I just like to add that, again, we go back to this noise level. I think the gentleman made a very good point. And so when we talk about this again, could you review those limits on the noise and at least tell us where these are coming from, as well as the operational hours? I'd like to know where those are coming from, because I truly understand what Commissioner Manny's saying, and also gentleman's point of view. If he just is coming in to pick up parts and going out right away, what is his noise level in that area? And there should be a way that we should allow that to happen inside of there on it. And again, I really want to thank you, Marguerite, for putting this together. This is a lot of work. I know it's worked hard.
It's not
and-
just me, it's a whole team.
And it just, it's by us being here discussing this that we can get through this.
With that, that concludes the study session. If there are individuals in attendance that missed the opportunity to speak during the public comment period earlier, please note that you may contact staff or submit your comments via email at pbaecomments@santaana-ana.org. Moving on to staff comments.
I have no comments for tonight.
Thank you, Min. Ali.
I just want to thank the commissioners and all the members of the community who sat through a very dense topic of discussion, and we received great feedback from you. Unlike for this evening, which was just a study session, when we get to the public hearings, you will have a fully developed staff report that proactively answers a lot of these questions. And just like we did for the related Bristol project, we don't intend to publish that staff report 72 hours before we intend to publish it, with ample time for the community and the commission to really read, digest, and develop thoughtful and meaningful questions for discussion. So stay tuned, and thanks again for all your input and questions this evening.
Thank you. Does the commission have any comments or questions for staff?
No, I just again want to thank everyone that came out for this meeting and for the open discussion. And also just remind everybody of Mayor's prayer records tomorrow morning.
Commissioner Escamilla?
Yeah, just going to congratulate both acting director Ali Pozesh Kapoor, I still can't say the name, and Mintai, I'm now assistant city manager. So congratulations on your promotions. And for sticking around with our agency here. Thank you to everyone that came out. I do think that this is not the end of the process, obviously, and very much for all of us beginning to really take an in-depth look at what we have before us. And Margarita, I think you did a wonderful job of summarizing a lot of information for us, and definitely appreciate the work that you've put in, and the rest of the team back there as well.
Commissioner Leo?
Do you know if the EIR has been released for the Segerstrom project down near South Coast Plaza?
It has not.
It has not been released yet.
No.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Wu.
I want to thank everyone for coming out today and thank you for your hard work, staff.
Echoing what the commission just said, thank you, staff. Thank you, everyone that came out and shared your thoughts and your comments with us. It's what we want to hear. It's what we need to hear. And with that, this meeting is adjourned. The next regular meeting is scheduled for February 24, 2025 at 5